block for a trouser. Before we get into it, let's talk about terminology that is used in pant block making or pattern making. Pant block will have a waistline, it has a hip line, it has the outer seam which runs on the outside of the leg, it has the inseam which runs from the crotch down to the floor along the inner thigh. It also has a crease line. A crease line starts at the waist in the front and it runs in the middle of the knee and extends all the way down to the floor. On the back, it starts about the hip line, it goes all the way down to the floor, also dividing the leg in half. Crotch line is a place on the body where the thighs join the hips. So if you're sitting on the chair with your thighs bent, this is the crotch line at the bend of the legs. Crotch extensions are part of the pant that cover the inner thigh. They start at the crease line and they curve inside to cover the inner thigh from the front and the back. We also have a crotch point where the back crotch extension meets the front crotch extension. So trouser block is divided in two parts. The first part is the foundation, and the foundation extends from the waist to the crotch line. Foundation determines what kind of a pant you're going to have, because the kind of a pant you're going to have depends on the length of the crotch extensions. It's that part that curves to the inside of the thigh. Very long crotch extension will produce a culotte, and a culotte usually fits like a skirt. I'll turn my mannequin to show you the side view. A culotte can flare completely away from the widest part of a buttock. It can be moderately flared, it can be extremely flared, it can even have pleats to make it even more full. And the same applies to the front. And what makes a culotte so voluminous is the length of the crotch extension. It's very, very long. Trouser block is not as full as a culotte. In the trouser, the pant hangs just straight down to the floor without cupping under the buttock, just from the widest part of the buttock straight down to the floor. The next slightly tighter dress pant would be a slack. And a slack has a shorter crotch extension and it comes a little bit closer to the body and it just cups slightly under the white part of the buttock. Usually here at the seat line, there is a little crease, and that means that the crotch extensions have been shortened to ensure a more trim look. The tightest pant is everybody's favorite, the jean. And jean block has the shortest crotch extensions. That sharply brings the fabric right under the buttock, and the same in the front. And if you think of a skinny jean, how tight you make it depends on how stretchable your fabric is and what is your desired fashion look for the garment. The other part of the trouser block is the leg part. So the foundation is from waist to crotch, and from the crotch down our legs. The shape of the leg is a choice of fashion and style. It has absolutely nothing to do with whether it's a culotte, a trouser, a slack, or a jean. Let's move to the necessary measurements for the trouser block. Before we get into the measurements, before you start taking measurements, please make sure that you take them without any ease. We're going to add wearing ease, which is described on page 1 of your handout. And the wearing ease at the waistline is 1/2 inch per seam, and at the hip line, 1/2 inch per seam as well. So take your measurements without any ease. The measurements we need is length to floor. And in a moment, I'm going to show you how to take those measurements. I just need to reposition the camera so you can see better. The second one is length to knee. The third one is the waist circumference. We already have that measurement, and this measurement is divided into quarters. So take this measurement, divide it in quarters, and add 1/2 inch wearing ease before we use it. The hip circumference we already have from the torso block and the skirt block. You also divide it in quarters and add 1/2 inch wearing ease before we use it. If your hip circumference is not as wide as your thigh circumference, so if your hips continue to expand beyond the crotch line or beyond the hip line, you need to measure on the outside from the waist down to the widest part. Let's say it's here. note what the length of it here is, and take the widest circumference around your thigh, and we're going to work with that measurement, and I will show you how to do that later. Then we have a dart placement, and the dart placement is a measurement we already have, and the crotch length. The crotch length is not going to be used in the draft, but the crotch length is the last thing I'm going to check when the draft is ready before I cut out the muslin for fitting. The crotch length is the measurement you take by placing a tape measure at the waist center back, passing it between the legs, then catching it and bringing it to the front center waist. This will tell you if your draft is successful, because the most common problem for women is a very short back of the pant, where the pant doesn't quite come up to the waist, and this is particularly noticeable when the woman has a curvy seat. So we're going to address that so that you don't waste your muslin. Of a waist circumference, we have measurement for the hip circumference from previous blocks, and we also have dart placement. What I'm going to show you is how to take waist to floor and waist to knee and crotch length measurements. So I'm going to start with waist to floor. This is 0. This is 0 of my tape measure, and I'm going to put it towards the floor. So 0 is going down to the floor. I'm going to turn so you can see me. I'm bending at the waist to locate my natural anatomical waist and where your outer seam in the future will be. So somewhere in the middle of the outside of your hip, you start lowering the tape measure to the floor, and you wait for it to hit the floor. So 0 is hitting the floor now. And what I have in my hand is the measurement, and for me it is 38 inches. So waist to floor for me is 38 inches. If you prefer, you can take waist to ankle measurement, it makes no difference. Now I'm going to slightly bend my knee like this to see it easily, and I'm going to do the same thing. 0 is going towards the floor. I'm at the same spot at my natural waist, and I'm going to wait for the tape measure to hit the knee area. And for me, it is 22 inches. Now I'm going to show you how to take crotch length measurement. You pass your tape between your legs like this. 0 goes either to the center front waist or center back waist, and then touching your body, you thread it to the opposite center waist. So from front to back, between your legs, touching your body, and my measurement is 26 inches. I have written down my measurements in my handout, and I want you to do the same. So what I have written on page number 2, I have length to floor or length to ankle as 38 inches. This is my measurement. I have length to knee as 22 inches. I have waist circumference. For me, it is 32 inches, and I divide it in 4. So I have 8, and I need to add half-inch ease. So in total, my waist circumference is going to be 8.5 inches. Then I have written my hip circumference. It's 41 inches. I divided it in 4, and I ended up with 10.25. And to that, I have added half an inch ease. So I have in total 10.75 inches. If you have wider thigh than a hip, then as I explained before, you need to measure the length from waist to the widest part of your lower body, and then measure circumference there. And we're going to work with those measurements, and I provided instructions in the handout for you how to deal with that. Dart placement, we know from previous blocks, for me it's 3.5 inches, and the crotch length for me is 26 inches. Now let's do the calculations together. I'm going to write them down. I hope you can see. After I write them down, I will bring the camera closer. But I want to write down the calculations so we can do them together. So in the upper right corner of my paper, which I taped to the wall, I have calculation A is crotch height. This is a calculation of total hip. So not half a hip, not quarter, it's a total hip. That's why it's highlighted. So it's 41 inches for me. Calculation A says 41 inches divided in 4. And for me, it is 10.25 inches. Calculation B is dart intake. We have done this before, nothing has changed. So calculation B has hip measurement. This is our measurement number 4, and we take the number provided in measurement number 4, and it's 10 3/4 inches minus waist measurement. For me, it's 8.5 inches, and the difference is 1 3/4 inches. So this is the difference for me between my hip and my waist. Okay, remember we talked about having 3 places to put darts. We have the front dart, we have the back dart, and then we have a side narrowing, or sort of a modified side dart. So I'm going to divide 1 3/4 inches into 3, and what I have is, I have a number between 5/8 and 3/4. I'm going to take 3/4 of an inch. Okay, so this is per dart. Okay, so calculation C is the crotch extension. Remember, this is the part where the fabric wraps around from the crease line towards the inner thigh to cover it from back and front. And it's a calculation which takes total hip. So again, for me, this is 41 inches. And we divide it in 2. So I have 20.5 inches. And we divide it in 10. And so I get roughly 2 inches. And calculation D is a calculation to determine where the hip line is. And the hip line is crotch length, height, which is our calculation A, divided in 3. So calculation A, I have 10.25 inches, and I divide it in 3, and I get roughly 3.5 inches. I will now move the camera so you can see the numbers better. I hope you have your calculations and measurements written down. Now we're ready to start drafting. You will need 2 of the same size pieces of tracing paper. I prefer to work with transparent tracing paper, and it's particularly important for this draft because the 2 pieces of paper will be laid on top of one another. The reason for that is we're going to build a grid on a piece of paper that's taped behind me to the wall, and we're going to build the front of the pant on that. Once this is done, I'm going to take identical piece of transparent pattern paper to the same draft, because the front and the back of the trouser block actually share the same grid. If you don't have transparent paper at home, you can work with any paper you have, but make sure after you finish the front draft, transfer the grid, copy it, or draft another one on a separate piece of paper. We have the grid, and I took detailed, slightly more close-up photos, which I hope you find useful. So now we have the grid for the front. We're going to continue building the block. I'm on page 3 of the handout, and it says in point number 1, we are at A, which will become side seam, and we need to mark side seam intake, or that 3rd dart on the side of the garment. Do you remember that half of that dart will go to the front and half will go to the back? So we need to work with half of the dart intake. For me, it's about 3/8 of an inch, and I'm going to mark it to the right of A. Okay? Before I mark it as anything else, I need to raise it by 1/2 inch. So this is my A. It's very small for me. I don't know if you can see it, but I will take another detailed photo later. And I marked half of my dart intake to the right of A, and I raised that point by 1/2 inch straight up, and this is now called A1. Okay, so I now have the side, the top at the waist of my side seam. I am now at A1, and A1 is the waist at center front. However, it's dropped by 1/2 inch. I'm going to go up 1/2 inch to the original waistline, and I'm going to measure dart placement. It's our measurement number 5. And so to the left of the center, which is 1/2 inch below A1, I'm at the original point before we dropped it, and I'm going to put 3.5 inches, which is my dart placement. Okay, this is my dart placement. You will notice that my dart placement does not match the crease line. It's okay, it doesn't have to. Your dart placement could be to the right of the crease line or to the left of the crease line or right on the crease line. It makes no difference. Okay, I am going to name this A3. I made a mistake here. This is not the new side seam, which is just to the right and up from A, is actually A2. So this is now A3. And from A3, I'm going to go to the left towards the crease line for me. And I'm going to measure the entire dart intake for me. And for me, it's 3/4 of an inch. And it takes me right to the crease line, which again is perfectly fine. So I'm going to put a little dot here, and this is A4. So this, from here to here, is my dart intake in total. And I'm going to find the middle between A3 and A4. And I'm going to drop a vertical line of 3.5 inches at 90 degrees to the waistline. Okay. There is my vertical line, which for me, it rides right next to the crease line. For you, it could be on the crease line, to the right of the crease line, or to the left of the crease line. And now I'm going to call it A5. And I'm going to connect A4 with A5 and A3 with A5, and these will be my dart legs. Okay, now I have a dart. Right there, A4, A3, A5 is my front dart. I am now going to work at the knee level. This is our D line. And I need to decide how wide the front of my leg at the knee is going to be. So we're not trying to make a fitted trouser. It's going to be mostly straight up and down trouser, including in the knee area, but we will taper it very slightly to the knee. So we're going to the right of D, and we're going to measure 1 inch. And this becomes D1. Okay, so from D to D1 is 1 inch. And I'm going to do exactly the same on the bottom. I'm going to go to the right of B and measure 1 inch and call it B1. Okay, so I now have D1 and I have B1. I am now going to measure the distance between D1, which is my new point at the knee, to the crease line. And when I have that distance, I'm going to measure it to the right of the crease line. So this will be the entire width of our pant in the front. So the distance between D1 and the crease line equals to the distance between crease line and the new point. For me, it was 5 3/8 from D1 to the crease line. So I measured 5 3/8 from the crease line to the right, and this is called D2. So I now have D1 and D2, and I will do exactly the same on the floor line, or the ankle line as you may have it. I'm going to measure the distance between B1 and the crease line, and between crease line towards future B2. So we now have D1, D2, B1, B2, and B1 is right underneath D1, and D2 is right on top of B2. Just need to check the handout. We finished point number 9. So now I'm going to start constructing the side seam, the outer seam. Point number 10 says, using a French curve, we're going to connect A2 and C. So for me, this is a very flat curve. I hope you can see where the French curve is. I don't know if you can because it's transparent. It basically looks like this. There's barely any curve. Do you see this little curve is all I have because I don't have a very big difference between my hip and my waist. For you, it could be a lot closer and you will notice a significant curve. For me, I don't have one. We've finished point number 10. Point 11 says, using your ruler, we're going to connect C and D1. So I'm placing my ruler at C, and in a straight line, I'm going to connect it with D. And then I'm going to take the ruler and connect D1 and B1. Now I am going to work to construct my waist. I'm at the top. I need to connect A2 with A1. But each corner, the corner at A1 and the corner at A2 need to start with a 90-degree angle. So I'm going to give myself a guideline. A short little line that makes this angle 90 degrees. And a short little angle that makes this line 90 degrees. Okay, so I have a little starter line here. And I have a starter line here. And with the French curve, I'm going to position it so that it can connect the two lines. Okay, so it looks like this. We have a new waistline. And I'm going to mark that we finished point number 13. Now we need to construct the crotch curve, and I'm going to work in the C1 corner. From this corner, with a ruler, I'm going to draw a 1.5 inch line at 45-degree angle. This becomes C3. See, I have a line extending to the right and at 45 degrees from C1 corner, and the line is 1.5 inches long. We finished point number 13, and now I'm going to draw the center front seam extending to the crotch curve. I'm placing the ruler, and I don't know if you can see the ruler, I hope you can. I need to connect A1, C3, and C2. So the ruler goes like this. And there is my crotch curve. Okay, so from A1 to below E is a straight line. You don't need to worry about it. And then it spins into a curve that ends at, it touches C3 and it ends at C2. Now I'm going to use my French curve again because I need to draw the inseam, and the upper part of the inseam between the crotch point and D2, which is the knee, is an inward facing curve. By inward I mean the curve is facing to the center of the pant. So here find slightly curvy part of the ruler, put it at C2 and connect it like this with D2. Do you see? It's a slight inward facing curve. And now I'm going to switch to a ruler. I'm going to connect D2 and B2 in a straight line. step back and take a look at what else needs to be done. We basically finished the draft of the front. The front is complete. What I'm going to do, I'm going to go to D1 and I'm going to smooth the curve a little bit so we blend it so that the seam does not have a sharp corner. Just find a more straight part of your ruler and just smooth that corner. And this is it. The front is constructed. I'm going to take a couple of close-up photos for you and make them part of a video, and then we will progress to constructing the back.